This is Internet Marketing. Brought to you by SiteVisibility at sitevisibility.co.uk. This is Internet Marketing. Now, before we start today, we'd like to encourage anyone looking for help with their digital marketing to get in touch with SiteVisibility. If you have a burning digital marketing question, or perhaps you're looking for an agency to work with, they'd love to hear from you. Give them a call, +44 1273 733 433, or you can fill out the form on the sitevisibility.co.uk/contact page. Alternatively, you can speak to either Scott or Sean via the live chat function on the site. They'd be happy to help. Now, today I'm joined by Julien Coquet at HubScan. Julien, how are you doing?
Hi, good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, you're in the south of France, aren't you?
Yes, very sunny and windy, but high temperatures, lavender fields. Pretty happy.
Why? I'm glad that you mentioned the weather, because I'm getting told off now for mentioning the weather too much. It's quite nice here in Brighton as well, but probably not as warm as it is down there. Let's start off. Tell us a bit about yourself and HubScan, what you've been doing.
Well, first of all, again, my name is Julien. I work for a company called Business and Decision, which is a consulting group out of Paris that does primarily traditional CRM and BI work. And as part of that, I'm part of an agency that does digital analytics exclusively. And because we were bored with auditing which digital marketing tags, JavaScript tags we're placing on customers' websites and making sure they were placed correctly by hand, so we built HubScan, which is a SaaS solution that does that verification for you automatically. So HubScan is a SaaS platform. So we provide a subscription where you can scan websites as much as you want, and it tells you where tags are well placed and whether they contain the correct values for your business.
Yeah, and of course, when we're talking about tags, we're talking about sort of little snippets of JavaScript, aren't we? So we're talking sort of tags in the sort of Google Tag Manager sense of the word tag, aren't we?
Correct. Yes. So not tags as in the semantic type. So not tags as in labels. Tags as in JavaScript bits of code, or like snippets, or however you want to call them. But yes, all of these scripts that make sure that internet interactions are tracked. So that could be Google Analytics, it could be Adobe, it can be Paywick, it can be just about anything. Yeah.
Now this whole area of sort of data, collecting data, for marketing purposes, is quite sort of. Well, it's very much in people's consciousness at the moment, isn't it? With GDPR. I mean, we'll come on to that in a minute. But in terms of like collecting data on the internet for marketing purposes, what sort of data do we really need?
There's the basic navigation data, like being able to say that consumers or visitors came through like campaign A, B, or C, and then visited a bunch of pages, eventually resulting in the conversion. So it can be buying something or signing up or registering for a newsletter. So all of these things need to be tracked by marketers to understand the performance of their website and essentially answer the primordial question, why do you have a website and is it performing the way you thought it was? So you need to at least have basic information about volumes, about page views, visits, and whatnot. And that is going to, in turn, be a bit enhanced and get more data about conversion. But the more sophisticated projects get in terms of digital marketing, the more qualified data you want to capture. So there's a fine line between the data you can capture just because you can and the data that you should be collecting because it's going to help decision makers understand how a content is consumed, how a product is viewed, and later purchased, for instance. So having, let's say, attributes, let's say that the product the visitor is looking at is really a refrigerator that is correctly tagged as a kitchen appliance that belongs to the refrigerators category and has a product name and a product number and a whole slew of attributes and categories and whatnot. All of that information becomes critical to a product manager because he or she will need to understand how his or her product line is being viewed in terms of browsing, and then how a given product is then added to a shopping cart or removed or bought as a companion product to another product, for instance, and eventually makes its way to the thank you page while in the shopping basket. So all of these things are super important from a merchandising and from a commerce point of view. And that's just for e-commerce. But let's say when I work for a big cosmetic brand, for instance, it's a global brand because I'm worth it, right? These guys have, let's say, if you want to buy makeup on their websites, for a given product, you'll have like multiple shades of lipstick or different quantities for a bottle of perfume. So all of these attributes help marketing and product teams understand how a given product is seen or not seen. Is my audience responding to the new product campaigns or new product launches that I'm putting out? And without that kind of information, without the sort of rich data that gets collected by, say, Google Analytics 360, for instance, if they don't have the information handy and in the correct format, then everything you want to do in terms of analysis or big data or testing or machine learning, and I get all the buzzwords that you'd like to insert here at this point, all of these initiatives will be for nothing if they don't have good data to play with.
We hear sometimes when people talk about data that's being collected off the internet, we hear this term clean data and dirty data. I'm just wondering what exactly is the difference between clean data and dirty data, and why is it so important?
Well, the notion of clean or dirty data is, of course, very subjective because it is intimately tied to as a company, what your definition of clean data should be. And that means being able to identify whether the data points you're collecting match a specification or at least expected values. Back to that example about lipstick I made earlier, if I look at my product attributes for one given lipstick and I start seeing attributes linked to perfume, then someone in the analysis department is going to have a very bad day trying to analyze that data. So it's a very basic example, maybe a bit too exaggerated, but that's really all it boils down to. Or for instance, expecting data in a specific format when it's not. Expecting a currency code in British pounds when it's really in Danish crowns. So it can be anything that has to do with what sort of data I was expecting to measure because my analysis depends on it, and what kind of data I'm really collecting because there's an issue on the site or my technical integration provider messed up my tagging plan. Also there's a whole slew of reasons why data can be corrupted along the way. And you want to avoid data corruption because that means your data becomes useless or semi-unusable.
Yeah. Now, from an organizational standpoint, I was just wondering sort of how the caring of this data is sort of managed. Who should care about data quality?
Well, you should have someone who's not necessarily a chief digital officer, but someone who is in charge of what sort of data you collect. So I know with GDPR we had this discussion about having a data protection officer in place. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with a role like data quality officer in companies these days, because you'd be able to make sure that whatever sort of data you collect matches a guideline, a Bible or a doctrine, however you want to call it. So right now, it's usually in the hands of a chief marketing officer or a CDO, but many times it's really in the hands of analysts because they're the ones who are going to be playing with the data. So they'll be the ones making initial recommendations about what kind of data I should have. So the issue with that is many times these roles are very much in demand. So resources come and go, and it's hard to keep track of who does what. So not to toot my own horn, but that's why we're trying to define Physician HubScan as a way to be the repository for that specification. Otherwise, you have to find someone who's really in charge, ideally with a backup resource, or someone who's going to be able to pick up the ball if it gets dropped, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the problem is if you don't have that sort of person to do that, then whoever is starting out as an analyst who's supposed to be just handling the data is going to be turned into what I like to call a data janitor. So he or she will need to be in charge of cleaning the data in the first place without even being able to play with it. And that leads to a lot of frustration because you get analysts that come from like super prestigious schools, like they have a doctorate in IT or like in data science. And these guys are stumped because the data they have to play with doesn't work or doesn't yield acceptable results when processed.
Yeah.
So they have to go back to super technical details and have to someone who knows JavaScript to make sure that they know why the data is not being collected properly. So again, as you can understand, I can talk about this for a long time. But yes, data quality is a huge aspect, or should be a huge aspect of digital marketing, and people keep doing it wrong. So again, back to the notion of dirty data being subjective, clean data being subjective. It becomes less subjective if everyone agrees on the definition of what constitutes good data.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned GDPR. Try and get those 4 letters in the right order. I keep getting them mixed up. I know we're all getting inundated at the moment, aren't we, with emails from our various subscriptions sort of verifying that we still want to be contacted and stuff. And we're hearing in the news that, not that many companies are truly ready. What's your view on this?
Well, first of all, to go back to the comment on email, I'm so very glad that this thing happened, because now I discovered that I was signed up to newsletters I never signed up for in the first place.
Yeah, me too.
So it's always statistically pleasant to unsubscribe for something you haven't. Anyway, I digress. So I like to think that GDPR is a great accomplishment by the EU legal system. So bear with me, and I'm only partly trolling here. GDPR is great in a way that is going to force companies, especially digital marketing department, to move out from the all-you-can-eat data collection strategy they've been using for years, just because data can be collected, to a model where they have to think about privacy first and about building a trust relationship with the visitors, because data exchange should be a win-win situation. It should be a tit for tat situation. So if you give me information, I should be giving you a valuable service in return.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the Vulcan mind meld between the company and the customer. You should be able to say, I am not going to spam you. And I'm not going to capture your data for evil purposes. I'm going to be as transparent as possible about the what we call the data usage and purposes that you agree on when you reach the new consent banners you have on websites now. Mm. So having as much information about what you do, which services you're sending data to, and having the consumer agree to be tracked for the good reasons, well, first of all, shows that you're in good faith. You're collecting data, but you're not necessarily evil.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to show that also shows the customers that, hey, you can be trusted. We're not going to do evil stuff with your data. We want to only contact you when needed. And if the service is good, eventually the customers will give more data more willingly. And that's where really the old campaigns linked to CRM and whatnot are going to become more relevant. Because frankly, these days, if you use like an email list of people to spam, frankly, you can expect that file to be ignored. Like 99%, like 99% of recipients are going to ignore you, or you'll have a very, very low, let's say, contact rate based on that list. So if you start out with contacts that trust you, you can expect much higher returns for these types of lists. So in a way, it's a good thing.
HubScanner's got a module for this as well, hasn't it? I don't know if you mentioned that. The ensures that data isn't collected outside of consent. How does that work? Yes.
So essentially what we do is we have what we call a scenario module that records user journeys, but also does record what you do on a web page. So it's basically like a glorified macro recorder. But we extended that module to emulate the way you would click on a consent banner on a website and say, I want to give consent for category A, B, or C of data usage. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is we have HubScan crawl your website and replay that consent scenario before looking at lots of pages and lots of clicks on your website. And if we see tags that don't belong to the categories you consented to, then you get alerts, and that way your DPO, or at least your team in charge of setting up GDPR properly, can immediately know that they have a rogue tag in there or something that is not categorized properly, or they have an issue with their configuration in GTM or whatnot that allows tags to be fired despite not consenting to them being used.
Oh, powerful stuff. So for our audience then, what would be a couple or three sort of key takeaways for them to think about?
Well, I think if you've been listening from the beginning, I think you'll notice that the big topic in my mouth has been data quality and how it's important to make sure that you have the right data so you can get the right marketing initiatives going. Otherwise, well, you're just going to make assumptions based on flawed data. The second point I'd like to make is it's sort of the origin to the previous point is if you don't have a battle plan, if you don't have a tagging plan, or if you don't have what we call a data collection strategy in place before you begin, then it's going to be very hard for you. So try and spend time with your team to understand what sort of data you're collecting and make sure you know for which purposes. So that way it's easier to manage.
Yeah.
The third point kind of goes with both of the previous points. The second one being, okay, if we want something very sophisticated in terms of data collection, I'm going to need to have extensive rules to check for data quality, and it takes an unhuman amount of time. It's super time consuming. So in our line of work, especially in digital marketing, it's good to be lazy. So being able to automate any sort of QA or quality assurance processes is key. So again, upscan. Yep. And like I said, so GDPR is actually a good thing for an industry because it's going to restore trust in websites and in agencies and maybe not Google and Facebook and like the big companies, but at least people will start maybe trusting companies that have a website and sell online more, and therefore make the relationship more meaningful.
Well, Julien, thanks so much for coming on. How can our listeners find out more about you and more about HubScan?
Well, if you Google me, Julien Coquet, I'm easy to find. But seriously, though, as far as HubScan goes, we've been very involved with the Measure Camp on-conference circuit. So if you have ever been to Measure Camp, you know what it's like. If you've not been to Measure Camp, you're missing out because it's an awesome conference about digital marketing. Mm-hmm. And we will be sponsoring the next occurrence of that conference in London on September 22nd, and in Brussels, I believe, in October. I don't have the exact date just yet. So check out measurecamp.org, and you'll be able to see if there's an event near you in autumn or winter. We can also find the website at hub-scan.com. We're on Twitter and Facebook, but I believe you'll be providing links in the podcast page. And if you want to take a HubScan for a test drive, you can make sure to request a demo and make sure to mention that you heard about us on this podcast.
Yep, and the show notes, which will include those links, will be at the usual place, sitevisibility.co.uk/IMpodcast. Please leave us a review. If you're enjoying the show, leave a review because it helps us to, bring better ideas and reach further people. If you want to contact us with suggestions or questions, the email is podcast@sitevisibility.co.uk. You can tweet at SiteVisibility. We have a LinkedIn Site Visibility group. That's all from me, Andy, and it's all from Julien.
Thank you, Andy. It's been great.
Thanks, Julien, and we'll see you next time on Internet Marketing.